All right. Shalom, family. It's your brother Kanaiba coming at you once again with part 2 of this video series, which is Super Bowl predictions from a spiritual vantage point. Okay? So, of course, in part 1, we began dealing with the history of the LA Rams, okay? Looking at it from a spiritual vantage point and getting into, the esoteric meanings behind different things dealing with the LA Rams, right? So here in part 2, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to switch the focus to the Cincinnati Bengals, okay? And we're going to pick up from there, see what we have. We're going to look at this thing from a spiritual vantage point, of course, and see if there's any correlations here. Okay, let's see if we can either make a case for the Bengals winning, or is it still pointing towards the LA Rams? Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the information. All right, so this is the history on the team, which of course is the Cincinnati Bengals, right? From Wikipedia. Now, off rip, you might be wondering to yourself, okay, this is about the Cincinnati Bengals, then why are we seeing the Cleveland Browns being talked about? Right there, your spidey senses should be going off. But I'm going to make my point first. Let's start reading. It says, former Cleveland Browns head coach Paul Brown began planning for the creation of the Bengals franchise in 1965. Okay, and of course, as we already know, 6 plus 5 equals what? 11. Okay, 11 and 11 is 22. But let's continue reading. It says, and Cincinnati's city council approved the construction of Riverfront Stadium in 1966. In 1966. What do we say about that number 66? Okay, that's for one of the horned deities, which is who? Molech or Baal, right? Let's keep going. It says, finally, in 1967, the Bengals were founded when a group headed by Brown received franchise approval by the American Football League, AFL, on May 23rd, another esoteric number on the left-hand side. Okay, it represents the intertwining serpent. It represents DNA as well. Okay, it says May 23rd, 1967. Then it goes on to say what? They began play in the 1968 season. Brown was the Bengals head coach from their inception to 1975, after being dismissed as the Browns head coach. Okay, so now we're going to scroll up a bit and get to this part of the information. Okay, I want to get straight to the point. And it reads, it says the Bengals won the AFC Championship in 1981, 88, and 2021. After the first 2 conference championships, they lost to the, watch out, San Francisco 49ers in Super Bowls 16 and Super Bowl 23. Let us pause right here. Okay, so the only 2 Super Bowls that the Bengals have been to, they played against the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, spidey senses should be going off right now. Okay, but I'm going to go right to that point, but just bear with me. Okay, so the Super Bowls that they lost to the 49ers in was Super Bowl 16 and Super Bowl 23. Very, very important. Let's pause here. Let's click on the Super Bowl 23 and let's look at the scores. Okay. So here we have Super Bowl 23. Okay. And of course you have the Cincinnati Bengals against the San Francisco 49ers. Okay. And we look here and we see the end scores. Okay. The Cincinnati Bengals had 16 points and the San Francisco 49ers had 20 points. So the score was 16-20. Or if you want to look at it on the flip side, the score was 20-16. Right? 2016. What's the significance about that, people? Remember the first part 1? What year did the Rams move back to LA? It was in 2016. They moved from St. Louis back to LA. Okay, do you think that this is a coincidence? Am I reaching? Well, that's for you to decide. Okay? But now let's get back to the information. Okay? So getting back to the information, I actually scrolled down towards the end of the paragraph because I want to get right to the point. Okay, this is what's most important. And it reads, the following weeks saw upset victories over the number 1 seed, Tennessee Titans, their first ever road playoff victory, and the number 2 seed, the Kansas City Chiefs, in the AFC Championship game. It says from these victories, the Bengals advanced to Super Bowl 56. Their first appearance in the NFL Championship game in 33 years. Allow me to repeat that last part. Their first appearance in the NFL Championship game in 33 years, where they are to face the Los Angeles Rams. Pause. Okay. Now, it has been 33 years since they have been to the Super Bowl. Talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay. And the last time that they played in the Super Bowl was against the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, and coincidentally, the team that the LA Rams had to beat to make it to the Super Bowl was who? The San Francisco 49ers. You cannot make this up. Okay? All this is a repeat of what happened 33 years ago, except this time the Rams are replacing the San Francisco 49ers. That's why I said that this particular game, not only for the Rams, but Odell Beckham Jr. in general, this game, this Super Bowl, is a point of enlightenment for them. Okay, that's why the 33 years later, the Bengals are in the Super Bowl, because this is a point of enlightenment for the Rams and Odell Beckham Jr. Okay, this thing, I've said it once, I've said it twice, I've said it 3 times. I'll say it again. This thing is scripted. Okay, you have to look at everything from a spiritual vantage point. Okay, now remember what I said earlier about Mr. Odell Beckham Jr. Remember, he started in New York. His career, his football career, it started in New York. Okay, which is furthest east. Okay, when you're looking at a map of America. So what does that tell you? He had to go west, or he had to take the left-hand path to reach a point of enlightenment to make it to the Super Bowl. Okay, that's what that's going into. from my critique. That's the way I see it. Okay? So now, let's get a little further into this dealing with the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay? Now, when you look at this year, okay, the beginning of February marked what's known as the Lunar New Year, or the Chinese New Year. Okay, 2022 is the Chinese New Year, which is represented by the tiger. Okay, which is another reason that this thing is scripted. Okay, this is another reason why it had to be the Cincinnati Bengals to actually make it to the Super Bowl this year. Okay, but let's read this information I have here. It says water tiger. Okay, each animal year is further associated with one of 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, or water. Keep that in mind, okay? So more precisely, 2022 is the year of the water tiger. Okay, now make a mental note of that, please, or write it down, even better. Okay, but this is the year of not just the tiger, but of the water tiger. Okay, now again, brothers have already done videos concerning, why the tiger. Okay, when looking at this from an esoteric view, or when the occult, so to speak. Of course, this would be representative of Shiva. Okay, the so-called Hindu god Shiva. Okay, it's always represented by a tiger. Okay, and there's a reason for that, but I'm not going to get too deep into that. Okay, because there's other brothers that's touched on that particular aspect. Okay, and brothers have also brought out that, if you look at it from the LA standpoint, the so-called god that would represent the Rams, of course, would be the so-called god known as Khnum, okay, from ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, and the correlation between that and the water tiger, okay, and the so-called god Khnum. And guess what? There just might be another Egyptian deity that was represented by a ram as well. But we're going to get into all that, okay? So now, moving forward, this is an article from ancientegyptonline.com, and it's about, of course, the so-called Egyptian god known as Khnum, okay? And it reads, Khnum was originally, watch this, a water god who was thought to rule over all water, including the rivers and lakes of the underworld. Okay, he was associated with the source of the Nile. Now let's pause for a minute. Okay, now this particular so-called deity known as Khnum is known as a quote-unquote water god, right? And we already established that 2022 is the year of the water tiger. So of course, it would make sense for the water tiger in the Super Bowl to go up against the water ram, which is another quote-unquote water deity. Okay, do you see the setup? Okay, but anyway, let's keep going. All right, so scrolling up a bit with this particular article, and it reads, the ram was considered to be a very potent animal, and so Khnum was associated with fertility. Okay, now watch closely what we're about to read. It says he makes an appearance on the famine stele found on Sahel Island. Okay, so this particular quote-unquote deity, Khnum, is written about on the famine stele. Okay, and it says the stele, which was allegedly inscribed during the reign of, I believe that's Djoser, okay, or Djoser, I believe it's Joser. We'll rock with Joser. It says, tells that the Pharaoh dreamed that the God would deliver the country from a terrible famine if a temple was built in his honor. The Pharaoh immediately consecrated a temple to Khnum. And as promised, the famine came to an end. Pause. Okay, so now we should be able to see a correlation here. Now, here in America, we're already seeing the beginning of a famine that's worsening by the day. Okay, so could this also be a part of the script to have the Rams in the Super Bowl, which is represented by Khnum? Okay, seeing that in ancient Egypt, it's believed that he delivered them from a famine. Okay, now let's do the math here. Who are the Rams playing? They're playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, represented by the Tiger, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Okay, what country has been in the news as of late because they've gone about hoarding food because they see a potential famine coming? It is none other than China. Okay, so now it should make sense why the Rams or Khnum is going up against the Bengals, the Tiger. Okay, because this is the Chinese New Year. Do you see the script now? Okay, do you see it? You really couldn't have written this any better. Okay, but I will say this. Okay, for those of you who think I may be reaching. Okay, whether or not the Rams win the Super Bowl, okay, if they think that this is gonna somehow conjure up the spirit of a fake god known as Khnum, either way it goes, a famine is still coming. Okay, because it's written in the scriptures, it's written in the Bible, so the famine is inevitable. Okay, so whatever script they're going by, it really makes no difference because the judgment is already written. Okay, so moving forward, let's take a look at both quarterbacks for the opposing teams. Okay, and as we see here, both quarterbacks were the number 9. Okay, now if you watched any of my previous videos, I've touched on what the number 9 represents. Okay, now the number 9 is the last single digit number. When dealing with numbers, it's the last single digit number before you go into the double digits. So the number 9 actually represents the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Okay, now you have both quarterbacks on opposing teams. They were the number 9. Put that together, it's 99. Now, this should bring you to remembrance of one of my past videos about Betty White. Okay, about her dying at 99 years old. I already said, I believe, and it doesn't have to be true, but just my critique, that she was sacrificed. Of course, she died on so-called New Year's Eve. That she was sacrificed for, of course, the so-called Roman god Janus. And I believe she was sacrificed for this particular year, 2022. Okay. So it's just very, very interesting seeing that, in this particular playoffs that's taking place during the so-called, Chinese New Year, that both quarterbacks are number 9. Put together is 99, right? I just found that very, very interesting. I thought I should touch on that really quick. Okay. So now, let's switch the focus towards the actual day that the Super Bowl is taking place on, okay? Which is February the 13th, because that has significance, okay, on the left-hand side, okay? And now we're on this website that I came across while doing my research. It's called spells8.com. Okay, so bear with me. And the article reads, it says February 2022 holidays, and these are not, these are pagan holidays, okay? Which all holidays are quote unquote pagan, okay? And it reads, this month, take time to focus on your preparations for the spring. It says it will be here before you know it, and having your projects ready to go will help you reach your personal as well as magical goals. Okay, they going off. But let's get to the point. Let's get to the list of these pagan holidays for February 2022. Okay, let's scroll up a bit here. So now looking at these so-called holidays, which they're pagan. Now let's hone in on February 13th, in which we know the Super Bowl takes place on February the 13th, right? So now we see why the Super Bowl has to take place on that day. It's because it's the beginning of the Roman festival of Parentalia. Okay, it says honor the ancestors. We know what that's going into, but let's get a little deeper into what this particular Roman festival of the Parentalia is, okay, which begins on February the 13th, which is the same day that the Super Bowl will be held on, okay? So this is actually an article from the website learnreligions.com, okay? And it's about the Parentalia, okay, which begins, as we already saw, on February the 13th, the same day the Super Bowl is held this year, okay? And of course, it reads, the Parentalia was, unlike many other Roman celebrations, often a time of quiet, personal reflection rather than boisterous merrymaking. Okay? Families often gathered together, visited the ancestral tombs of their forebears, and offered libations to the dead. Sometimes offerings of bread and wine were left for the deceased kinfolk. It says, and if a family had a household deity, a small sacrifice might be made to them as well. Let's pause. Okay. This is what they did beginning on February the 13th. Okay. This is actually a day that they celebrate the dead. Okay. They celebrate and venerate the dead, which is something we are not supposed to do as Israelites. Okay, they're giving sacrifices and offerings for the dead. That's something we're not supposed to do. Okay, but that's why the Super Bowl is being held on February the 13th this year. Okay, because it's actually in veneration of the dead. Okay, it's almost kind of similar to what the Travis Scott concert was about. That was in veneration of the dead as well. Okay, when dealing with the lunar Samhain. Okay, when you go back and look at my video series on the Travis Scott situation, that concert, that hellish concert. Okay. But anyway, let's continue with the article, okay? So scrolling up a bit here, and it continues. During the Parentalia, which traditionally lasted 7 days, although some sources place it at 8 or 9 days. Now, that's what I'm going to roll with, because most of the sources that I looked into actually says it lasts 9 days, okay? But anyway, we're going to continue on. It says Romans suspended much of their regular businesses. Weddings were put on a hold during that time. Temples shut their doors to the public, and politicians and lawmakers postponed all business during the parentalia. Okay, so pretty much everything shut down during this pretty much week span that started on February the 13th. And again, this year's Super Bowl is being held on February the 13th, okay? It's in veneration of the parentalia. That's why the Super Bowl is on February the 13th this year, for the parentalia, in honor of the dead, okay? And just to make another point, like we said, this lasts at least a week, okay? Now remember, within that, you're gonna have, within this week, the week of the 13th, you're gonna also have what's known as so-called Valentine's Day, which again is pagan as well, okay? The Lupercalia, okay? That's also pagan, okay? It's for what's the deal? It's Pan or Dionysus, however you pronounce it, okay? That's who that's for, dealing with Valentine's Day, okay? And then, not to mention, okay, a week from Sunday, a week from this particular Super Bowl, which is on, I believe, the 20th, you're going to have the NBA All-Star Game. It's also going to be within the parentalia. Do you think that's a coincidence? It's not. All of this is scripted, okay? A lot of times what you have to do, these major sporting events, you have to look at the date it's held on and research that particular date, because most of the time that date has, pagan roots to it, okay? But continuing on with the article, it reads, on the final day of parentalia, a public feast called the Feralia was held. Although little is known about, okay, let's scroll up a bit here. And the article continues to say, I'm going to start from the top again. It says, on the final day of parentalia, a public feast called the Feralia was held. Although little is known about the specific rituals of Feralia. It says, Ovid writes. Now, I'm not going to read this because whatever this is, I'm not going to read it out loud. It sounds like he's chanting something. Okay, looks like he's trying to conjure up something. I'm not reading that out loud. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to scroll down towards the end of this article. Okay, so let's scroll here. And the article ends by saying this. The Feralia was also a time to celebrate the god Jupiter and his aspect as Luperter Feretrius, I believe that is. But anyway, the subduer of enemies and oath breakers. Okay, so you have the parentalia, which starts February the 13th. Which now we know why the Super Bowl is on February 13th. And the parentalia, it lasts at least a week, could be 9 days, but it lasts at least a week. And on the last day of the parentalia, you have what's known as the Feralia, okay? And that's in veneration of Jupiter, okay? So we see what's going on. We see the esoteric component here, okay? We see the pagan aspect that's going on, okay? And now we have more understanding on why the Super Bowl is taking place on February the 13th, okay? So now let's go back just a little bit. This is something I forgot because I said we were going to touch on this. I said that there might be another so-called ram deity in ancient Egypt that nobody really focused on, okay? The focus seems to be Khnum, okay? But there's another, okay? And its name is Hereshaf, okay? Or at least I believe that's how it's pronounced. It's Hereshaf, okay? Now, let's read up a little bit, and it reads, it says, in Egyptian mythology, Hereshaf, or Hershef, Now, this is really the point, the meaning of this name. It says, he who is on his lake. Okay, we're going to come right back to that. Now, let's finish it out. It says, transcribed in Greek as Hersaphes or Orsaphes, was an ancient ram deity whose cult was centered in ancient Herculopis. Okay, so let's pause right there real quick. All right, let's go back up to the meaning of the name of this so-called ram deity, which is Hershaf. It means he who is on his lake. Okay, so now it should make sense why the Rams had to move back to LA. Okay, the Rams had to move back to LA to be more associated with the LA Lakers. Okay, they're from the same place. The Rams and the Lakers are both from LA. They have to be associated because, as we just saw, the name Hershaf means he who is on his lake. Do you see the correlation there? Okay, this whole thing is set up, it's scripted. Okay, so now let's bring it back to Rome and focus on another so-called horned deity, okay, known as Faunus. Okay, because I said we're going to get into that as well, right? So now you may be thinking, well, now where did Faunus come from? But you reaching. Well, just bear with me. Okay, I always got more, right? But the article reads, it says, in ancient Roman religion and myth, Faunus was the horned god of the forest, plains, and fields. When he made cattle fertile, he was called Inuus, right? It says he came to be equated in literature with the Greek god Pan. Okay, now if you've been watching my videos long enough, I've talked about this so-called Greek god Pan. I've talked about him often. Well, Faunus is just the Roman equivalent to the so-called Greek god Pan. Okay, so now let's scroll up a bit and let's get right to the point. So scrolling up a bit and let's focus in right on the middle of the article where it says festivals. Okay, the festival that's associated with Faunus, and it's called the Finalia. Okay, and would you look at the dates that this particular festival takes place on? February the 13th and December the 5th. Now that's very significant, both of those dates, because they coincide with this Super Bowl. It plays right into the narrative. Okay, now of course we know about February the 13th. Okay, we know there's another festival known as the Parentalia, which is in veneration of the quote-unquote dead, right? So now we know that there's another festival that takes place on February the 13th known as the Finalia, okay, which is in veneration of the horned deity Faunus, right? And not only is he celebrated on February the 13th, he's also celebrated on December the 5th, okay? Now remember, I told you, whenever a major sporting event takes place, you need to research that particular date, because most of the time, maybe not all the time, but most of the time, that particular date has pagan roots. Now we know about February the 13th. What about December the 5th? And how does it play into this narrative with the Super Bowl that's taking place on February the 13th? Okay, which is taking place in LA. That should be a big giveaway. I want you to think back to last year on December 5th. What major sporting event took place? Okay, just think about it for a minute. Okay, we're not going to take too long. I'm about to give it away. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So now would you look at here? Did this jog your memory? Yes, none other than Mr. Gervonta Davis. His very last fight against Mr. Pitbull Cruz took place on December the 5th of last year. This was in veneration of Faunus, okay? And which you look at the trunks that Mr. Gervonta Davis is wearing. He's wearing the purple and gold for Kobe, because this fight took place in LA at the Staples Center. Okay. Now, this was on December the 5th, which is in veneration of Faunus. And we know that February the 13th is also in veneration of Faunus as well, which is why the Super Bowl is also taking place in LA. Okay. Two events that represent Faunus are taking place in LA. What are the odds? Okay. You cannot tell me that this is not scripted. And again, focusing in on his trunks, he's doing pretty much the same thing that Odell Beckham did. Okay, Odell Beckham Jr. with those cleats. Okay, it's really the same thing. Okay, they wear certain things to conjure certain spirits. Okay, but if at this point, based on all the information I brought out, and if you can still fix your mouth to say that this is a coincidence, listen, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, but here again, this is very telling when you looking at, the dates that represents the festival that venerates Faunus, which is a horned deity. Again, this is why I say, and it's just my critique, everything seems to be pointing towards the Rams winning the Super Bowl. Okay? But anyway, I believe this is actually a good place to end part 2 of this video series titled Super Bowl Predictions from a Spiritual Vantage Point. Okay? We brought out a lot in part 2. Okay? Now, I'm going to come at you with part 3, Lord willing, tomorrow. It's actually getting pretty late. So I promise I'm going to try to get you part 3 tomorrow at some point before the Super Bowl, okay? I know I'm coming out with part 3 on the day of the Super Bowl, but again, I'm going to try to put it out before the Super Bowl since, again, it's my prediction. Okay. But anyway, as always, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakwadash. I want to thank all you brothers and sisters for tuning in. I'll see you in part 3, Lord willing. And until next time, Shalom, family.